flag this spam so quickly. We are officially broadcasting this live on YouTube. You are more than welcome to join the conversation in the comments. And with any luck, that everything will be working just fine. Except for the audio is not working, apparently. That's on. Sorry. That's a little, sorry about that. Not exactly the way I wanted to start the video, but technical issues do happen. And I don't mean to be lighthearted in discussing something that is extremely serious. Just a few minutes ago, I happened to catch a tweet from the AP suggesting that Steve Jobs had passed away. And that was within, I think, 50 seconds or so of it being tweeted. At first, I could not, verify the information and thought, well, maybe the account got hacked. And then it was verified, of course, on Apple's website, as well as through other channels, including a press release from Apple's board of directors. So, anyway, so I think everybody can hear me now. Or at least they should be able to. Sorry, I did not have the audio levels checked there. I was merely saying at the beginning of this broadcast how I really won't tolerate any kind of trolling. I've covered this in other videos before, specifically in relation to Steve Jobs and the condition he has been in for quite some time. It's really not, in good taste to celebrate the passing of anybody. And whether you like Apple or not, maybe you've never liked anything that Steve Jobs has done, you still can't deny that the things that he did do impacted the things that you have. He's certainly been, in this industry, the consumer electronics industry, the personal computing industry, for decades, and has influenced so many. And whether they, are other companies, individuals, his influence is certainly going to be felt, I think, for years to come. So, again, I'm seeing that some news reports are being broadcast on mainstream media, and the thing that's disconcerting about that is that they're not giving it as much time as I would want to give it. And so, as much as I want to do another video about my impressions of yesterday's keynote, specifically discussing what Apple's been doing and some of their new product launches, like iOS 5, iPhone 4S, I really, it's interesting timing. I don't know if today was the day that he passed, or if that had happened yesterday, or possibly even prior to yesterday. Steve, I think, was the consummate businessman, and to the very last, to say that he was anything really but a visionary, I think is short-sighted. You've got blinders on if you think that the man who gave so much, and yes, he certainly made a big name for himself in a huge company that he was kicked out of it at one point in time. You just can't deny that this is pretty big news, especially for geeks. We've talked about what's going to happen with Apple after Steve had left, and I think that succession plan, has been executed as well as it could have ever been executed. I don't think this takes away from anything that Apple had announced yesterday. I certainly wouldn't imagine people would go out and buy Apple products just to remember Steve Jobs. I don't think that's the right way to do it. Certainly I think you should treasure the time that he had with us, influencing our lives in one way or another. Again, whether you liked Apple or whether you agreed with Steve Jobs and his tactics, he was still influential. That's a big deal, and by and large, I would say in a positive capacity. I'm not about to burst into tears. I didn't know the man on a personal level. And again, I didn't mean to, flip the audio switch the way that I had. It was kind of adding a little levity to otherwise what would be a very somber situation. So I'm just going to try to read some comments as they scroll by. I'm reading from both the live YouTube page as well as on my Google Plus profile. This is from Ivan Milos Lopez. I cannot begin to express my grief. I will really miss him. He was a huge contributor to technology and humanity in general. He will always live on in the soul of technology and in our memories. And I think that's actually a very nice statement. He'll live on in the soul of technology. And years ago, I was not, a huge fan of Apple. And I always, had said to others, largely geeks, why would I want to have a relationship with my computer? It's an inanimate object. But I think it's appropriate to say that, Steve Jobs and what he did, will be continued to, live on in the technology around us in some way, shape, or form. I mean, that's how history evolves. You don't have to feel bad about this happening, but you cannot deny, because I'm reading some of the comments, you can't deny the influence that Steve Jobs had. And I gotta tell you, Twitter has just exploded from the time, like literally less than a minute. It was just, it was gone. I couldn't even keep up everything. Steve Jobs, I would say twice as, you think it's bad on iPhone launch day, it was twice as much there, and Google Plus just exploded. I couldn't see anything past people sharing information, and I think the callous nature that some people are wanting to show of themselves it's frowned upon. And I saw a couple people posting again news from yesterday in a lighthearted fashion. I mean, we rib each other, iPhone versus Android, iOS versus Android. But some people are remarking on those now and said, yeah, it's too soon. And not to say that there's going to be a moratorium on OS debates, but just keep in mind that you're talking about a human being. It's one thing to talk about a product that is the amalgamation of a collective intelligence and say that it's better or worse than something else, because we're not talking about, a specific human being. But in this case, we are talking about a human being. Someone who, done things, and done things to have influenced so many people to the point where a lot of you are interested in technology for one reason or another. Steve would not have released the 4S, says the creepy panda. I don't know. I can't speculate. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I've already been having these discussions on Google+. A lot of people forget history. Apple has always kind of been behind the curve in terms of the latest specs with their hardware, all the way back to the first iPhone, which in the day of 3G being out there, it wasn't a 3G phone. And then between the 3G and the 3GS, we had the same arguments that people are having between the 4 and the 4S. You remember, the 3GS wasn't much of an upgrade from the 3G. And so some people didn't upgrade, and that's fine. The same thing could be said for the difference between the iPhone 4 and the 4S. So this is really, it's nothing new. I don't think Steve Jobs wouldn't have launched an iPhone 4S. I think it still very much has the hallmark of a Steve Jobs, all the way down to the video stabilization right there on the phone itself in terms of recording 1080p video. That's a finer point, and that's, I think, really what Steve Jobs was to me. Is he looked after those details and made them so seamless so that you didn't have to think about them. And while geeks might appreciate getting in and tweaking every single possible thing they can, rooting devices and doing all that other fun stuff, 99% of the world doesn't. They just want a device that works. I don't want to hack my toaster. I just want it to work. I'm trying to read the comments as they're coming in. Someone had mentioned that they're still waiting for LTE. Again, I'm not sure if I want to make this an iPhone full-on discussion. The reason why they're probably waiting on LTE, CNET had a great article on this today, largely because of the immaturity of the chipsets and the size constraints of the chips are larger. And Apple's trying to create, a smaller device, not necessarily a larger device specifically in relation to LTE. Maybe in another year or so. But for them not to have adopted it just means they're not ready for it. I guess CNN may actually be broadcasting something. I don't have rights to to rebroadcast anything. I know fair use policies and whatnot, but I'd rather not. Steve Jobs has left a lasting impact on the technological world, bringing technology to people who would have probably never given it the time of day and made them love it. Thanks, Steve, says SR Primo. Thank you. And if you guys want to go ahead and flag some of the comments that are less than, well, shall we say, polite, and flag them as spam, that would be appreciated. I'm going to go ahead and look on the Google Plus thread here. Mike Mathia quoted Steve Jobs, "Your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life." And I think Steve lived that quote. Absolutely. David Laspina asks me to remind people to donate to cancer.org, and that's where you can, if you care to fight cancer, and we've certainly done that with live broadcasts in the past. You can head over there to donate money and know where it's going. If you go to apple.com, at least at this point in time, there's a picture of Steve Jobs right there on the front page, and the subpage says if you'd like to share your thoughts, memories, and condolences, you can email rememberingsteve@apple.com. That's just FYI. Ed Russell, I was never an Apple fanboy, but I always admired the Apple products that came out partially due to Steve's genius. See, you don't have to be, a fan or a fanboy to understand and appreciate that when people actually get out of their house and try to make an impact, some of them do. It's easy to sit and comment on a thread, but to actually live your life and to do something, it's a big deal. People talk smack about the things that I do all the time, and then I look at their YouTube channel and they have nothing. It's like, well, when you step up, then I'll critique you, and then we can, build each other up in that capacity. So, just be respectful. This was a human being, and a human being that influenced, well, a lot of people, millions and millions and millions of people. Billions, dare I say. At the Pauline Sweetman, end of a day, end of an era. I'm sad for the Jobs family, but glad to have lived in the same timeline as Steve Jobs, witnessing and benefiting from his vision and achievement. He was a genius in so many ways. Rich Foreman, rest in peace, Steve Jobs, one of the few who have actually helped make the world a better place by changing the way we all communicate and handle our businesses. You are a true visionary who will be missed. A lot of rest in pieces. Keith Peterson, this is again on the Google Plus discussion thread, says that he was one of our Gutenbergs. And of course, you might have known Gutenberg for movable type, the printing press. And, it's one thing to have a piece of technology. It's another thing to make that technology easy to use. And there is an art to that. I was just watching a movie, Connected, that spoke to, in fact, hang on. I've got the press release right here. A film by Tiffany Schlain, whose father, Leonard Schlain, had written a series of books about the right brain, or the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere in the brain, one more logical, one more artistic, and how the two, are connected and need to be connected to create something more perfect. And I think, that should be what we'd want technology to be, accessible, not just hitting you over the head with its power. I mean, true power isn't wielded that way. I mean, it's just there. It works. And I think Steve embodies that type of ethos. Hirsch Agarwal says, Steve Jobs was a great man, and I agree with you that he inspired not only people, but the world as a whole. The first Apple was a revolution in the way people thought about personal computing. Then the iPod line was a revolution in the way people think and listen to music. Then they came out with the iPhone and finally the iPad. Not only these products, but all of the laptops and other computers. Apple changed the way the world works, whether people are willing to accept it or not. I think that's fair to say. Steve Jobs was a great man, and not only a genius, but also a great human being. Steve Jobs should be respected by everyone, not only those who love Apple products, but those who love music, computing, smartphones, tablets, and many other great, the comment goes on, many other great things. Nobody has the right to say he deserved to die. He's a great man, and he will always be remembered as one of the greatest influences in human revolution. And I think it's also important to note, I mean, if you do like music, and look at what he did. He forced the music industry to change, the music industry that everyone had been fighting. He is the figurehead. He stuck his neck out there so many times. And, look at what he accomplished, which isn't to say that everything that Apple did was amazing. I mean, you could look at Ping as a current social network on iTunes, and some would say, well, it's not as big as Apple, I think, hoped it would have been, but they tried, and that's the thing. At least they tried, and they certainly have the resources to pull it off. Gonna go ahead and hit refresh on this page. Okay, there's quite a few people who are posting in the Google Plus thread, and it's easier to follow too. So again, I'm going to be flipping back and forth between the two. Concerning Apple about being late to get certain things or advances, says Scott Su Chin, I remember perhaps Steve himself saying, we may not be the first, but we will be the best. Errol Hastings says, definitely an inspiration for anyone out there thinking of a career in technology or music and video or any other media which Steve Jobs hasn't changed for the better dramatically. The only Apple product I have is the iPod Touch because that's all I can afford, but I will be even more proud of it now. Steve Jobs had a rough life, but still pushed forward and do great things. Well, some would argue the opposite, saying he had an easy life, but I don't think that what he did was easy to accomplish. Few, if anybody, people could have accomplished that, or what he accomplished. Richard Beddington says, Steve transcends technology in a way that would have been unimaginable even 10 years ago. Rest in peace, Steve. Scrolling on. Sonny Dixon, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Steve Jobs. Jen Satterwhite quotes Steve Jobs' Stanford speech, remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life, because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. And it's sad that we have to, think about, death I guess in relation to our life. We can still live it. We can still make a difference. As big as Steve Jobs, you never really know. Going back to YouTube here, Jose Torres 256 says, if it wasn't for Steve, I wouldn't appreciate technology. M-Town Terror says, never been a fan of most Apple products. Basically, all I use is an iPod for music, derp, and a Mac for graphic designing. However, I have been a fan of Steve Jobs. Felix Figurger says, we'll miss you, Steve. Can't wait to see what you create in heaven. It's an interesting way of thinking about his passing. Papa Roach 351, he quotes, this may be a real quote, I can't verify it, but he says, Bill Gates, the former chief executive of Microsoft, said in a statement that he is truly saddened to learn of Steve Jobs' death. He added, the world rarely sees someone who has had the profound impact Steve has had, and the effects which will be felt for many generations to come. For those of us lucky enough to get to work with him, it's been an insanely great honor. I will miss Steve immensely. And I think that was heartfelt. I mean, they kind of grew up together, if you know your history. Freenex says, there's a lot to be said about Steve's dedication to his company. He stuck with his dreams and passion until the very end, and when it got to the point that he knew of his inevitable fate, he made every effort to ensure his dream would continue to live on. By the way, thank you. I see that people are liking this video. I appreciate that. You can hit like while it's streaming live. I appreciate that, if only because you're not just showing respect to me. You're showing respect to the topic at hand. This is talking about a human being who influenced technology. And my community is largely made of geeks. People who like Apple, people who can't stand Apple, people who never knew Steve Jobs, people who wanted to know Steve Jobs. So I appreciate keeping that in perspective. Thank you for liking the video. I was a little worried that it would go the other direction. I'd rather not hand this over to trolls. I think it was a few weeks ago, I had uploaded a video wherein I had recorded the first time that I bought a Mac, and that was true footage. It's when I worked at Tech TV. I'd seen the Mac on set, and I thought, it's kind of interesting. OS X had been released, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Let's see what this is all about. And so went down to the Palo Alto store and walked in, and there was Steve Jobs. So I had met him. I walked up, of course, nervous, and I said, "Hi, I'm Chris Pirillo. I host Call for Help on Tech TV. Just wanted to say, nice to meet you." And he shook my hand, and he smiled. He says, great, buy an iMac with a SuperDrive. I mean, I've always laughed about that because, people would always describe Steve Jobs as the salesman. I mean, the company's number one salesman. I mean, that's what he said. I mean, I don't think he knew what else to say. I really didn't know what else to say. But I can say that, that was my brush with Steve Jobs, and it wasn't a negative one, as some people have experienced. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, two completely different people, completely different. And I probably know Steve Wozniak a little better. Known him, I've had other conversations with Steve Wozniak, of course. Steve Jobs, not so much. I don't think Steve Jobs remembered that encounter, but it was nice to have said, or now to be able to say that I shook Steve Jobs' hand, and it's pretty cool. Old Farm Show says, Chris, thank you for this feed. Thank you for tuning in. Bambinosto says, now is John Lennon and Steve Jobs in heaven. Couldn't confirm nor deny that, really. Let's see here. I'm trying to read your comments as quickly as they scroll by. And I see a couple trolling posts, but I'm ignoring them. Oh, interesting. Human sequencer with numbers interspersed in his user name. I love this. You turn technology into magic. You are always a great man and a legend. Wow. You turned technology into magic. You don't have to think about how it works. It works, and that's kind of what makes it magical. And look at how many other devices have benefited from it. You cannot say that Apple didn't inspire and that Steve Jobs wasn't a huge part of that. He turned the company around and, made it into something that, is indelibly a part of our history, I had phones that had, they were PDAs at the time, but I really think he gave rise to what would now be considered smartphones. I think, Android has certainly benefited from seeing the interactions of user interfaces. I mean, you can't say that, one hasn't influenced the other. I mean, they're kind of always one-upping, one another. I mean, that's inspiration. It's the way this industry works. And vice versa, and that's the thing. We're not competing. We're all human beings. We're not really competing at the core level. We're just trying to move the ball forward. And I just think that's important to kind of just keep in perspective. Enthusiastic Gamer 121. Steve Jobs was the greatest leader our industry has ever known. We are all blessed by his life. And I'm sorry the message kind of scrolled off. Ms. Chantal Roy says, if you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. That's a quote from Steve Jobs. Dell CEO, Michael Dell. This is from Jonathan Leake, so I can't confirm this, but he's posted this. Today the world lost a visionary leader. The technology industry lost an iconic legend, and I lost a friend and fellow founder, said Michael Dell, chief executive and founder of Dell Incorporated, the big computer maker. The legacy of Steve Jobs will be remembered for generations to come. My thoughts and prayers go out to his family and to the Apple team. I've met Michael Dell as well, and he's done a couple of the hangouts that we've had on Google+, and I believe those words, just like Bill Gates, are absolutely sincere. So let me go ahead and flip back to the Google+ thread, hit refresh, and try to read a couple more quotes. Anibal Velez says, well, he's responsible for many great things. It's the explosion of technology and set a standard in today's media technology. It's fair. Heron Forteau says, he was a great man. I've never used many Apple products, but he was a truly inspiring man and one that inspired the entire tech world. And Hirsch asks again, please remind people that he did not only give us Macs, but also iPods, iTunes, the iPad, and the iPhone. And I think that's been covered, but it's important to know that his legacy is not just one success, but it's been a series of successes that will continue on. That's his legacy. And if you have a product from Apple around, you've got part of Steve's soul with you. I mean, as iOS continues to evolve, OS 10, I mean, Steve's there. I mean, you can't avoid that. That's kind of a beautiful thing. I mean, how many other people could have that kind of legacy? How I could only hope to influence. I mean, I'm just a mosquito on this beach of technology enthusiasts. To influence that many people. That's something to look up to. I mean, whether you like what he did, whether you like the products that he made, that legacy. That if there's a meaning of life, that legacy. And I gotta tell you, Steve's legacy lives on in my home for real. I've covered this before. My girlfriend and I met because, well, honey, do you want to? I don't think that they really knew the story from your mouth, but she's in here watching the news as it scrolls by as well. Are you feeling shy?
I'll let you tell it. I tend to give the long version.
Give the long version. That's okay. We're live streaming, honey.
Okay. Well, can you hear me?
Come closer to the mic, just in case.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not going to put her on camera.
Okay. So, anyways, my dad, I guess it was all over the news, the 3GS came out, and he offered me to buy me one for my birthday. And first I was like, no, I don't need it. I don't need an iPhone. So then I changed my mind. I said, well, let me do some research, and then I'll get back to you to see if that's what I want for my birthday. So I ended up Googling the iPhone 3GS, and yours actually wasn't the first one I saw. I saw a couple of YouTube videos, and I just thought they were all boring, and I mean, I'm a girl, I wanted it interesting. So then I saw Chris's video, and he kept me entertained. I was laughing. He's funny. So he did a really good review, and I still remember you were wearing a red shirt in that video, which is funny. So I just thought you were funny and cute, of course. And I was like, wow, he makes some really interesting points. It looks interesting, so I decided I wanted it. And then a year later, I wanted a MacBook Pro, and I went back to Chris and to see what his thoughts were about the MacBook Pro. And then I ended up getting the MacBook Pro. So I guess short version of how I came across you. That's
yeah. The accurate version. So if Steve had not inspired and directed, down to just that last detail, the iPhone or Mac OS 10 or the MacBook or any of these products, you may not have wanted them. You may not have searched. You may not have found me. I may not have wanted them. I mean, so in a very direct and yet indirect way, Apple's products brought me to the most treasured thing in my life, and that would be my girlfriend. So just thought we'd flesh that out here. So again, that's legacy, and that's Steve's legacy is my relationship. Richard Dalton, some of us AARP type people struggle to keep up with ever advancing technology. Steve Jobs made it all more understandable for us. I'll always appreciate him for that. Jimmy Lark, even though the original visionary has now come and gone, the visionaries to come will surely be insanely great while pressing forward with the think different mentality for as long as Apple remains Apple. And this is from the Google Plus thread. And this is a quote, although Maizar Rashid, I'm not sure who's quoted here, but it's a quote. Bill Gates may have put a computer on every office desk, but it was Steve Jobs who put one in every dorm room, in every bedroom, in every living room. And then, years later, he repeated the trick, putting one in every bag, in every pocket, thanks to the iPad and iPhone. If you use a computer or smartphone today, it's either one he created or an imitation of his genius. Not my quote. Mark Zuckerberg apparently has posted on Facebook, apparently, according to Eric Santos. Steve, thank you for being a mentor and a friend. Thanks for showing that what you build can change the world. I will miss you. Even Mark saying things, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see other, large technology pundits and leaders speak out or speak up about his passing. Not necessarily speak out. And apparently, Cook has sent out an email about Jobs' passing. Let's go back to the YouTube comment thread. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate it. This is almost unheard of for our live broadcasts. 439 likes. That's thank you for that. And I think Steve appreciates that. To say that he doesn't see what's going on, he absolutely does. How many other? The world hasn't stopped, and people do die. Visionaries do die, but. This is, and I don't think it's just because I follow geeks and technologists, because a lot of people know about Apple and Apple's, now former leader, Steve Jobs. The world is talking about this. I mean, if there's a global consciousness, if you were to tap into it, man, you just can't avoid it. This is I'm sad. I'm sad that it happened. I've lost friends to cancer. Derek Miller, you might remember when we raised money to help fight cancer last year, specifically in Derek's memory. But I'm sad because of what could have been, the products that had yet to be created. And I would say that about anybody who's, accomplished things that we appreciate. And to me, how you could look down upon anybody who changed the world in that way, it speaks more to your character than it does to somebody else's when you remember them in that capacity. And I don't think that's going to change. The sentiment right now may be a little, for some, emotional. I'm not going to break down into tears. We've kind of known this has been coming for some time. I'm not personally connected with Steve Jobs, but I do think this is a great loss. We might forget that, weeks, months, years from now, the sensibility that someone has just passed away, someone so influential. But what we can remember is that the things that this person did continue to influence indirectly. I've covered some of the questions that are coming in. I've already covered in earlier videos, so I'd hate to repeat myself. Thank you, Chris, for this video. You really know what to say, says Nate Yanni 23. Obviously this wasn't scheduled, wasn't planning anything. We all knew that this was coming, but I wasn't, really even, thinking much past, like yesterday's announcements. Been, having those heated discussions on Google+. And just to note, and this is a good reminder from AJM 2308, 56 is too young. Think about that. My dad is 68. How many people do you know who have died younger? How many people do you know now who will have lived older than Steve Jobs? Death can come to any of us for any reason. We've lost members of our community through tragic accidents a few times over. And that just should give us time, or it should force us to sit back and think about what we have and what we can do today and who we can influence. Because if you can't, and I'm not saying we can all be a Steve Jobs. The world could only really handle one. Who's going to step up in his place? And I don't mean just as CEO. I think metaphorically that we don't know. That person, may be alive. They may not have yet been born. but you can do something to inspire. In everything that I do, even if you don't like any of the things that I post on my blog, on Locker Gnome, on the YouTube channel, you may completely disagree with my opinion in the way I deliver it. You may think one thing or another, but I only do things if I believe it is going to help, not hurt. And I keep that kind of in my crosshairs. Is this going to be helpful? Is this going to stop someone from doing something they shouldn't do? Is this going to help someone make a better decision for themselves? Is it going to give them perspective? Is it going to give them better understanding? And so I at least try. And so many people don't even try, because it's easier for people to admonish others for trying rather than trying themselves. In fact, there was a quote, I think this came in from Chris Voss today. It was a breakdown, like try, the only difference between try and triumph is oomph. I think that was it. Which it's very apropos, very connected to what I'm saying here. You got to try, and I think Steve Jobs certainly pushed the envelope. I love Chrome OS. Normally, I'm not going to drop the F-bomb directly, but I think this is a great quote. Cancer, hard. So I'm just bleep myself there because I'm trying to keep this as family friendly as it could possibly be, but I think we can all agree cancer sucks. Chris, Steve inspired me to go into the technology industry, and I'm currently studying with aims of getting a job at Apple. I really wished I could have worked with Mr. Jobs. Do you think Microsoft and Android and other players, as sad as it is, see an opportunity to achieve? They should always see that. They should always strive to achieve bigger and better. I mean, Steve's passing, again, should serve as a reminder to all of us that time is precious. Do something. Do something. Anything. Do something. And even if your world is just to the end of the block, fine. Change that part of your world. Do something. Being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me. Quote from Steve Jobs through J.H. Spy 1. Max Zemus's dad apparently passed away from cancer when he was 9 years old. Cancer is boy, I tell you what. Oh, now this is interesting, and I don't know if it's accurate, but I like that. Unstoppable Apps says iPhone 4S. The S stands for Steve. I think it's a nice way to put it. I'm going to try to remember that as I talk about the 4S in the future. Chris, it's amazing how he didn't step down from his chair until he couldn't function in it. 222 Chucho. It's true. He stayed as long as he possibly could. Drader 98. I just lost an uncle to cancer. Cancer sucks. Is there anybody else out there who has lost a friend or a family member to cancer? Feel free to say so. You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. I think it's just as relevant to talk about that in relation to Steve Jobs. Another quote from Callum Catterall. Steve Jobs said, "Death is the destination we all share." Keep that in mind. Blurry Beaver, my mom is currently fighting breast cancer. Commercialize his death. Oh, that's so respectful. A-Gun17. I'm not trying to commercialize anything. I know that mainstream media is certainly covering this. Geeks have forums all around the internet. This is just another one where we're discussing exactly what's going on. It's news, and we're all thinking about it. We're all tweeting about it. We're all plussing about it. We're on Facebook. All I'm doing is having a conversation. That's it. I didn't post anything to my blog at the point that it happened. I just got on Google Plus right away, tweeted it out right away, set up the live stream on YouTube right away. So, yeah, I'm trying to facilitate the conversation and remind you we are talking about a human being. and I know I'm going to have to, address the trolls, from now until the hereafter, as I'm sure Steve is as well. Paranormal Corp. I'm going to try to get this before it scrolls off. I never knew this man. I never met him, but the joy he brought to the world, from his countless ideas to his amazing products, this man had the power to make people smile while using the computer. He turned a simple gray box into a work of art. Forever he will be remembered and missed. Today the world has lost a visionary and mentor to all technologists, but mostly the entire world has lost a great friend. Rest in peace, Steve. A lot of people posting about their cancer stories. My cousin at 4 years old died from cancer. Everybody's thoughts and prayers are going out to anybody who had been impacted by cancer. Flush stuff. I lost an aunt to cancer a few years ago and another aunt last year to breast cancer. My friend didn't even have family to recognize the body when he did die. I still remember him strong. Oh wait, that was a different quote, but apparently someone else had lost a friend to cancer. It's just not a... That's definitely not a something to revel in. Going back to the Google Plus thread. Gonna scroll. Justin Carruthers says, Steve Jobs is one of the few human beings out there who was able to recreate his vision of a future with easy-to-use technology devices. He broke boundaries, was inventive, creative, and really put himself out there. Steve was one of the most respectable men of our generation in time, and his spirit will live on in all the Apple products. I just want to say thank you for... Oh, sorry. He was thanking me for doing the live feed, and basically me doing my best to bring people to pay their respects. I think we're all doing it in our own way. Tweeting, posting, blogging, sharing, videoing, whatever. You can say something, you don't have to say anything. All I ask is that you remember this is a human being who, generally speaking, changed the world and gave so many people joy in terms of how they interacted with technology. I mean, could you imagine giving... I couldn't imagine giving the PC I grew up with to a toddler. Yet I watch my nephew play with the iPod Touch, and he just gets it. I couldn't do that. Oh, come on. Could you imagine trying to teach a toddler DOS? Wasn't going to happen. Of course, I learned basic programming on a C64, but either way, that wasn't as much fun for most people. I would have loved to have had something like an iPad or an iPod Touch or an iPhone or an Android device or any of these accessible technologies when I was that age. I would have loved, and my kids will have something like that, thanks in no small part to Steve Jobs. Matt Ryan, who of course helps with Locker Gnome, noted in the Google Plus thread, he lost his grandmother to cancer a few years ago. Looks like Paul Allen released a statement, and this is according to Ivan Smith on Google+, so I'm more inclined to believe it. My condolences to Steve Jobs' family and friend. We've lost a unique tech pioneer and auteur who knew how to make amazingly great products. Steve fought a long battle against tough odds in a very brave way. He kept doing amazing things in the face of all that adversity. As someone who has had his own medical challenges, I couldn't help but be encouraged by how he persevered. G.E. Mars says Steve Jobs is like the Christopher Reeves of the computer world. And I think by that, iconic, certainly, in terms of a role in Superman. Steve Jobs was a superman, but a man nonetheless. Revered because of how he persevered. He did not achieve because, the prize was handed to him. He drove forward. And so when people talk about his vision, it was so laser focused on that's it. No variation from that. And I wish, I could say, I've done the same thing. I've had to make so many compromises over the years. And I think we all had. I am sure Steve did as well with Apple. But he was uncompromising in his drive to build a great company with a solid foundation and sitting on a stockpile of cash that could be part of his legacy. And that was everything in his head. Everything that we touch and play with, came from somewhere in there. in some way, shape, or form. Influence. You can't say where an exact point of influence happened necessarily. We all inspire one another. So again, even those who would never imagine ever talking about Apple in one way, shape, or form, are certainly going to find themselves inundated as people remember him today or in the future. This is probably the only bit of, remembering I'm going to care to do, to talk about this much longer past the initial hour of his passing, or at least learning of his passing, would be a bit odd. But certainly I will likely reference Steve Jobs in a future video. It looks like Ted McDermott has posted a link in the Google Plus thread where he's got some quotes from Tim Cook and Bill Gates' family. Interesting. Jennifer Altimore. I'd be interested in hearing the perspective. Because of Steve Jobs, I have the iPad. Because I have the iPad, my son's voice was discovered. That's interesting. Jorge A. Correa says, you can't connect the dots looking forward, believing that the dots will connect down the road and give you the confidence to follow your heart. And that was a quote from Steve Jobs. Let me flip back here. Getting back to the comments thread. Yeah, boy, it's unbelievable. Still, the comments coming in. Can't just do a search in line with the comments if you're watching this video now and look at how many. I would go as far as to say the word cancer shows up more times in this comment thread on YouTube than Steve's name. And it's unbelievable, unreal. The Ronald on YouTube, the Ronald Martin says the innovation will have to continue without us, or I guess maybe you mean through us, because it's not really without us. It's going to be without Steve from this point forward. Steve's final great work, uniting the community like this, amazing, says Hippo Cowboy. Think about that. I mean, especially to anybody who's watching this live. What are you doing right now? You're watching me remember and try to put into words my perspective on Steve's passing. We're connected in this way. I wanted to do this because it's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy sharing my thoughts and feelings and expressing them. And as a human being, it's my right to do that, to express myself. And it's to me, it's a bit more personal, as impersonal as a video feed might be, but it's more personal for me to speak than it is for me to use the written word as I've done in the past. You can catch my inflection. You see I use my hands when I speak. I mean, I'm a real human being too. You're a real human being. And we're connecting over a topic that, the media is absolutely going to cover it. I'm sure there will be articles upon articles and books upon books and, segments upon segments that are posted online and, on TV and in the radio. But the way I wanted to do it was with you, with my community, the people who at least know that I exist. This is how I choose to spend my time, is interacting. And not many people would want to do that, but I would rather interact with people. This is a quote allegedly from, and I have to say allegedly because I can't verify this, from Google's chairman Eric Schmidt. This is via Tim Oak 6. Steve Jobs is the most successful CEO in the U.S. of the last 25 years. He uniquely combined an artist's touch and an engineer's vision to build an extraordinary company, one of the greatest American leaders in history. Messin' around in your town says, Chris, I'm a high schooler in Maine. There's a program called MLTI. Look it up. Thanks to him, I am watching this video. Thanks to him, I help others with YouTube. Thanks to him, we have all been changed. It's no surprise someone had reported iRockman1 that... wait, no, hang on. Mr. Mouseboy 2 says, right now Steve Jobs is the top trending on Twitter. That does not surprise me. iRockman1 does say Steve Jobs was one in a billion. He truly thought he could change the world, and he did. You cannot deny that. And honestly, I think whether you agreed or disagreed with the things that he had done, I'm very appreciative that you're being respectful, or many of you are being respectful with the comments or liking the video. Of course, we all should dislike what had happened to Steve, but the memory of Steve is really, that's his legacy. People are going to remember that he lived, but it's what he left behind, and that's something that you should like. He's influenced. Man, I mean, you could only hope to have a fraction of that influence. And what's the point of living if you can't, share the human condition, if you can't make the world a better place? If it's not a better place when you leave, you've wasted a tremendous opportunity. Your life is a tremendous opportunity. What are you going to do with it? I mean, we all know what Steve did with it. What are you going to do? There's your challenge. I just think about that. Think about it. Ace2472 does say he appreciates this live video. Thank you for appreciating what we're trying to put together here. Just a collection of our thoughts as it's kind of happened. There's so many, I would say global events that have happened in my lifetime where I didn't have the ability to connect with people in real time. The Challenger disaster was one of those moments when I was in the 7th grade, long before the internet, was around, at least for most of us. The idea of sharing my thoughts and feelings like this, it was remote. 9/11. Another, event that, changed the world. Didn't have a chance to really connect with people in real time as easily as we can today. These are events that happen that, people remember. And while people may not remember today as the day that we lost Steve Jobs, we would hopefully remember Steve Jobs or his legacy. So I don't think that's going to change a bit. I don't think you couldn't forget Steve Jobs. He's just a part of our history. Steve Jobs changed the world. Without him, there would be no Apple. There would be no multi-touch. Thousands of lives would not have been saved. The spark of innovation that has now become our lives would never have been shared. This is from H.B. Garva. You have to pardon. Yeah, I'm sorry. H.B. Hargava 7. And he notes again, to end it out, or close it out, may the legacy live forever. I'm trying to scroll past a lot. There's a few people who are being very disrespectful. And it's one thing to be disrespectful to me, but it's another thing to be disrespectful to someone who has just lost his life and think about their family. Put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel? How would you feel if people applauded your death? How would you feel if people made light of your death? Let's shift that a bit. How would you feel if they were saying these things about someone in your family? Your mother, your father, your brother, your sister. How would you feel? Just think about that. So many people don't think about that. In the world of social media, they just put it out there. They just, I don't care. Blah. And it's one thing when we're talking about a product or a service that is by and large nameless, faceless. It's an inanimate object. But it's another thing entirely to talk about somebody else, specifically within hours of their death, in such a disrespectful manner. I caught another quote on Google Plus today. Why is it that people with closed mouths... I'm sorry, screwed that up. Why is it that people with closed minds have open mouths? And I think that's very closed-minded to make light of anything that's happened in and around the death of a human being. And I'm just going to say that over and over again. It's not just Steve Jobs; it's a human being. JP, sorry, the comments are scrolling. JP Lafort 2. Steve Jobs at the time was the most innovative person alive. No one could ever replace his position at Apple. The reason Apple couldn't show us something better was because he was gone. He was too ill to direct his company at a point where Apple was at its best. It's very sad to see him go. I agree and disagree. With the iPhone, say, and I think this may be what was said in relation, I don't think that the iPhone would have been better or worse with or without Steve Jobs, today. I don't want to get into the big debate. I've covered this extensively in Google Plus ad nauseum. It didn't lose anything. Apple's not losing momentum. To think that they didn't have this succession plan in place years before they announced anything, you're deluding yourself. They knew what was going to happen. They'd been planning accordingly for months, if not years. Apple knew, and yet they've still survived. Steve was hands-on as he could possibly be. Hopefully he's entrusted the right people to see that vision through. Will it happen? Time will tell. I can only hope that that the vision will continue, and I think the ethos is strong enough that it will, if the right people are put in power. Someone had noted here, thank you. Thank you for the ability to talk about what is saddening our day and has us worried about the future of a company that has changed all our lives in one way or another, and without question for the better. This is from Ipodicus1. And I think that we all need to look at the future of Apple the same way he looked at life. And again, quoting the connect the dots statement that we quoted earlier. Technology has lost the greatest mind, says Pedrinho, and I'm sorry I missed the 65, Pedrinho 65. I'm trying to catch your usernames if I can, although sometimes they're kind of coming in at breakneck speed. And I'm probably going to be wrapping it up here in just a little while. Again, I've got, you can still, after watching this video, you can still comment, but you won't be able to rate the video. Thankfully, I'm grateful. Honestly, I'm sure the trolls are going to come out of the woodwork, especially on YouTube. So I'm grateful that you've liked the video, so that it doesn't the amount of dislikes is infinitesimally small in comparison. Because it wouldn't feel right. We're hopefully talking about someone that we all respected. If you did not respect Steve Jobs, there's something seriously wrong with you. I mean, even if you didn't agree with him, even if you didn't like any of the products that he had a hand in, you still have to respect what he did. You have to. Otherwise, what do you respect? It can't be much. Ace Ellis quoting Business Week. This has been one of my mantras, focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, but it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. Yeah, I've got a series of quotes, and I'm going to read a couple more, and then, as I said, I'm just going to wind this down. Sasha J. on Google+. iCloud was his personal vision. From way back in the 80s, he visioned everything would be connected together, and that we will have everything, everywhere available. This is his legacy and how he saw it going live, the cloud. And it just works. God bless him for bringing us all the smart stuff we use daily, even in non-Apple products, because they are all inspired from it. Yes, even Windows is inspired from the Finder desktop since 1995. All the smartphones in the world are copies of the iPhone. App stores are his. Downloadable MP3s are his. We will only fully understand what he brought to the world, maybe now in the coming days, reflecting back. And I think Sasha could have gone into more details in terms of qualifying what he said. I'm not really going to debate or argue or clarify anything he said, but I think it's accurate. Making things easier and more accessible. What are you doing to make things easier and more accessible? Nothing? Or something. The onus is on you. This is your life. What are you going to do with it? We now know Steve Jobs' life and what he did with it. And that legacy, again, lives on in so many things around us. Going back to YouTube, likely to wrap it up. I think it's a bit flippant, but from Faldies says, if it wasn't for Steve Jobs, we would still be running Windows Basic. I perish the thought. I would hope that somebody else would have had another idea or a better idea. It certainly would have been a different world if we were still dealing with Windows Basic. Basic, like way back in the day. Way back. Not today. Today we've kind of evolved because everybody's inspired one another. I'm going to read maybe one more quote. And I'll leave it here because I think this is a good one. I mostly fix computers, but I still do something to make someone's life easier. This is from Bambinosto again. So there's someone who's doing something. Something generally positive. Helping people. Help people. And we may not do it the same way. That's okay. We may not agree with how we decide to help people. We may have a limited view of who needs to be helped and how. But we're doing something. So instead of continuing to do nothing, if that's indeed what you are doing, change the world. Look at what Steve Jobs had done. Any one of us could do the same thing. Granted, it's easier if timing is in your favor. Apple starting today, you could do it. They might have their work cut out for them. They've been around. It takes decades sometimes to find that kind of success. But so many startups these days are finding success seemingly overnight. You can do something. Live your life so that when you're no longer with us, people will mourn your passing. Please keep that in mind. If you see anybody speaking ill of the passing of anybody, Steve Jobs or otherwise, remind them to be human, if only for a second. Keep that in mind. Just maintain some level of respect. That's all I ask. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this live video down. It will be encoded and, I guess, saved as a video for other people to watch if they want to, watch the experience as it unfolded with the live video feed within, I guess, minutes of learning of Steve Jobs' passing. It'll be here indefinitely. There's really not much else for me to say. Covered a lot of quotes as much as I possibly can. I'm not going to, belabor this. There's a lot of discussions happening. But thank you if you watched live for tuning in. And I would say a good 99% of you being very respectful. Thank you. I think maybe 12 of you were not respectful. It's a pretty good number. Hundreds versus not even maybe a dozen or so. And thank you. Again, thank you for being a part of my community. Thank you for being a part of my life. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of yours. We may not agree all the time. In fact, probably a majority of the time we're not going to agree. But at least there's somewhat a level of respect that we have, right? For people who do things and share things and are somewhat open-minded and can have discussions without resorting to ad hominem attacks. I think we're done. I'm just going to go ahead and close her out. I'm watching the thank you for the comments, but I'm not. Thank you for saying thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close her out. I guess we'll keep the discussion rolling in social media elsewhere.